Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today we are going to introduce you to Lynne Oldham, who's the Chief People Officer at Stash. She leads talent acquisition, development, and retention efforts through building an inclusive remote first hybrid organization. Lynne joined Stash as a talent management and development leader with 20 years of experience in HR leadership and key talent acquisition. Before Stash, she was Zoom's chief people officer, joining the company before its IPO and navigating continued business scaling, employee engagement, and safeguarding culture through unprecedented times. Stash is an investing app dedicated to empowering people to invest and build better lives. Stash's plans unlock access to a suite of simple, automated solutions designed to help people find security and peace of mind through investing. Thanks for coming on the show, Lynne.
Thank you so much, Rick.
So, hey, Lynn, you've been doing HR for a while now. What brought you into it? Like, what was the thing that made you say, hey, I'm going to do this?
Well, I took a rather circuitous route into HR because, back in the day, I was the first in my family to go to college.
Mm.
And my parents didn't know jack about going to college. So my mother was suggesting nursing. Nursing is a great career. You can get in and out, like to have a family. You can wear a uniform, so you can have nice clothes outside of work. She made the arguments that she knew to make. And I got into nursing school, and about 4 semesters in is when you start giving each other injection shots. And my hand shook like crazy. I didn't like it. I wanted to help people, but not through a nursing career. And I learned that lesson hard when I was in the VA hospital giving a pre-op shot to a gentleman who let out a blood-curdling scream. And that was the end of my career.
That was your career. It was over, just like that.
I switched to business administration, finance, which, like, when I was young, that was what I loved. And I just didn't know enough to follow what I loved, right? So I ended up with my degree in business administration, finance. And my first job was in this little company off the New York Thruway, who said, we love the fact that you have this degree. And I had been working in a hospital while I was finishing my degree. So they liked the combination of the two. My first job, I paid pharmacy claims for retirees for this little company off the New York State Thruway.
That's such a niche kind of thing, right? That's so.
Well, and then I've done every job across the spectrum since then. The only thing I haven't done job-wise in HR is be a recruiter, and I do enough recruiting for myself and my teams that I feel like I can check that box too.
Yeah, just to go back, how did your mom feel when you decided I'm not going to be a nurse? Did she kind of be like, "Oh no, give it a shot, try again," or no, she was cool and do what you want to do?
She was cool. It's my mom. My mom didn't live to see. She died at 42, so she didn't see a lot of my what I've done with my career. I always like to say, like, I would have loved her to see my clothes because I still have nice clothes despite the fact that I don't wear a uniform all day, but I really would love to have had her see where all this took me, because it's been a wonderful ride.
So, how did you make the journey from that company from the New York Through Fair into kind of more recently big tech and the startup life?
Yeah. Well, what I'd like if somebody coined this term for me, they called me an HR unicorn, because I didn't stay put in one industry. So not only did I move into bigger roles, but I also changed industry. So I've been in banking, I've been in berries, I've been in oil and gas. I've been in telecom. I've been in publishing. And that's not the last of the list. It's a long list.
Wait, did you say berries?
Berries. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the berries business?
I was the chief people officer for Driscoll's. You know Driscoll's.
It
That's a
sounds.
household. Yeah.
Everyone knows.
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm
Everyone knows.
embarrassed.
There you go.
Was
Rick
it,
knows.
what is that? A department store?
No, it's a
It's-
family-owned berry business. Blueberries,
Oh,
strawberries, blackberries.
gotcha.
And yeah, I was their chief people officer for a while on the West Coast in Watsonville, California.
So wait, did you kind of keep moving, to different
Yeah.
locations as well
Oh,
as
yeah.
moving jobs?
Oh, not only did I move industry, but I've moved around the US and continents. So I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the UK, all sounding very glamorous, but all the most stretch I've ever felt in my career when I had to move house, move my family, do a totally different job in a totally different work environment. So a lot of stretch happened during those cycles, and I'm thankful for all of it. It's all been really great for me as I've gotten those opportunities.
We don't talk about this enough, but how was it for the family when you had to, it's like, sometimes you hear like, oh, I was an army brat or whatever, and you're moving all over the place. So you were an HR, army brat, moving the family over. How did they take it? Did they feel like, oh no, we're moving it? Or did they say, oh, this is cool, we're going to go
Oh
to a new
no,
place?
all the this is cool kind of things. Like I was the one going to work. When I was in Paris, I worked right by the opera. So I'd walk to the opera, right near the opera, and I'd go for 9. And contrary to popular belief, at least in the bank I worked in, the French worked fairly long hours. So I wouldn't be walking home till 8:30 at night. Meanwhile, they were all out enjoying the city. They benefited greatly from my my abroad stints. Yes, so did I.
So you get along very well with Rick because he loves traveling also. So you
Ah.
two are kindred spirits. He loves every way he can go find a place to travel. So
I love it. I love it.
I mean, despite my like kind of wanderlust and my love for travel,
Yeah.
admittedly, I went to school in Berkeley, born and raised in San Francisco. I still live and work in San Francisco, and I haven't had the chance to kind of move out of the Bay Area bubble, so to speak. What gave you the courage when these opportunities presented themselves to not only move job functions to get into HR, but also switch industries, switch cities, switch countries, switch functions? It's quite a lot.
Well, at the time, I was working for a French company. And in French companies, you have a career for life. That's just how they think about things. It's not the same as here in the US. And so when I was working for an expat who was leading the HR function at the bank in New York, he said to me, I want you to be me when I'm ready to go to my next assignment. He worked in the bank for 30 years, had 10 different jobs. So he said, but you can't do that unless they know you, they meaning the head office. So I'd love you to go do this. And he literally told me on a Friday, could you tell me by Monday whether you want to do this or not? So we had to make a mad scramble and a lot of decisions, and a lot of like pros and cons lists that weekend. But we said yes. I said yes. Then for the entire summer, I did not know what I was going to do. They hadn't defined the role yet. So I arrived October 1st of 2006 to the French office to work for someone totally different than I had been working for, and to find out that they wanted me to develop the program that would identify top talent and develop them across the globe. So I was literally in a little bit of shock because to that point in my career, I had taken the path of what I'll call back office HR. So comp, benefits, payroll, HRIS, expatriations, moving people around the world, more the tactical part of that, not the strategic part of that. And they were asking me to do a very strategic thing, which was a game changer for me. And I did it all with taking a lot of risk. And I don't know where that came from, Rick. I can't even explain it to you. It just like came out of me somehow, but I just trusted the person who was talking to me in New York, Michel Magny, who is just passed this last year. And he was just such an advocate and such a great individual. I trusted him. And so I took the leap and I landed very nicely and I enjoyed my work. I traveled around the globe, making sure that what we were talking, defining top talent, was the same thing in Germany and Japan. Because the bank I was with was in 85 countries. So we had to make sure we were speaking a global universal language. It was a trip. It was a trip.
So a couple of takeaways I'm getting is that one, for people who'll be watching, listening to this, is that it seems like you have to take risks and go out of your comfort zone, because you could have easily said, I'm just going to stay here in New Jersey or wherever and be comfortable, but you push yourself out to do that. And then also it seems like you found a great mentor who looked after you to really keep an eye on you and help promote your career. So are there other things too you've noticed in your journey as a career, as an HR professional, that could extend to other people, like what, how they could kind of navigate their career similar to what you're doing and how you were able to be successful?
I think in something in what we talked about earlier around this idea of multiple industries, I never took no for an answer, Jack, and I got a lot of no's, right? Because when you talk to agencies, and no shade to agencies, but they like to fill their roles. If they get a role from a company and it's a retail company, they're looking for retail HR people because they think they have to. They think that's the quicker way to a sale. So I never took no for an answer, and I found my own ways in, right? My time at Zoom, I met someone who introduced me to their CFO. I had lunch with her, and then the rest is history. So I just paved my own path and never really took no for an answer.
When you say don't not take no for an answer, how do you do it? Because like a lot of times, you can't just say no, because then I mean,
I'll
are you
give you another
diplomatic away?
example.
Like how do you say no to your boss or your
Let me tell you, this is a really great example. This is in looking for another role. I wanted this role with a telecom company. It was so perfect for me. It was a little bit of expansion for me. And the agency told me, no, we're not putting your resume forward. I called the company. I asked who the head of HR was. I asked, don't laugh at me, what her fax number was, because there's no fax anymore, right? Turns out the fax was on the back credenza of her office. I faxed her a note. She called the agency. He didn't really want to speak to me for a while, but she said, why aren't you showing me Lynne Oldham? And the rest is history. But the bottom line is, like, I just keep pushing. I'm not pushy, but I keep pushing.
That's a bold move, because they could easily be like, who is this woman who's trying to push her way into here?
That's right. But it worked. It worked. I can't say it works 100% of the time, but I've been knocking wood, lucky.
All right, wait, let me ask you this, Rick and Lynn. I've always found, like, for recruiting, I would be polite but persistent. Is that kind of similar, where you don't want to be that overbearing jerk, but you still want to get what you want done? So you have to find polite ways of doing it. Is that sort of like what you mean, or no? Like you were just more like,
yeah, no. I think polite but persistent is the right way to describe it. I'm definitely, if you know me, Rick. You know me, Jack. I'm not going to be that like bull, but I am That's good. I like the words polite and persistent.
But I think
And so
that's good advice, right? Because I think too often it's very easy for our brain to kind of wander and think, well, if I do this, they're going to say no. So I'm just going to save everyone some time and just not do it or not ask or not tell people how I feel about, wanting a certain thing or trying to accomplish a certain goal. But if you just put it out there, and I don't want to seem too cheesy, but you give yourself that opportunity, right? Where sure, if someone says no, then that's fine, and we'll learn from it and go on. But if
Because
they
I
say
think what
yes,
we
then
do, Rick, I think what we do is we create stories in our head as to why we haven't heard from them, why,
right,
and it isn't the truth, right? It's just that we're all going a million different directions, and maybe it's taken an extra couple of days to get you on the interview docket, et cetera. So I don't think it's terrible to be what did you call it?
polite but persistent,
Politely
or
persistent.
politely persistent. Either, yeah. Yeah, because it's hard if you go like with a fastball, right? And you just go at somebody, then they get taken aback. But if you kind of gently get into that. And now the story with the fax, was that for Zoom? Was that
No, no,
oh,
no,
okay.
no.
That was
Zoom was lunch with the CFO. That was a company called Mobilecom.
mhm.
Once again, I'm going to date myself. It was a pager company.
Oh my gosh. I remember pagers, yes.
I think some people still use them, like doctors and things like that. But yeah. Anyway.
And so when, one of the cool things or crazy things is when you went to Zoom, right? That had to be because this was right in the heart. Like, did you start just when the pandemic hit?
I started in January. No, I had two major events there. I started in January of 19, and we went public April of 19. So I took them up and through their IPO, and then the pandemic happened the following March. And that was a challenging time because really, I mean, for everybody, but what Zoom was like this two-sided, there were two, I'll call it dual challenges. The first challenge was around this idea of scaling the business for the incredible demand that happened during the pandemic. I was employee 1384 in January of 2019. By the time I left in January of 22, we had about 8,000 employees. That growth came between March of 20 and 2021. So there were times, I call it organized bedlam, when we were hiring and onboarding 200 plus employees per month. It was like I said, organized bedlam. The second part of that challenge was taking care of our own employees, because while we were making sure Zoom was on for everyone, we were also having to make sure that our employees were what do I want to say? I want to say just
Safe and
safe, ensure their well-being. There was a lot to doing what we did. The growth, the change, everybody went home. You think Zoom was a company that was remote before? No, we were 85% of us were in an office. So we all had to go home too and deal with the pandemic while we were growing and firing on all cylinders. So I think we did a lot of interesting things during that time, and we added some very innovative mental health benefits that really did do the trick for our employees. We had a happy crew with 100 employees who were all embedded in the business, who were brought on to really help with the culture. But during the pandemic, they ramped up and were doing really great things to make sure people felt good, they felt included. So it was quite the ride. It's really almost hard to describe. I need to write a book one day.
You should, because like, how can you hire so many people during that time period where I'm imagine these aren't people like, and no disparaging to like Amazon, they're not like workers like, on the factory floor or something like that. You're talking about very experienced software engineers and
Yes.
other technologists and what have you. So they need a lot of interviewing and what have you. How did you do 200 a month? That seems, especially under the circumstances where some people are remote and then maybe, they don't know what's going on. They're freaked
Right.
out.
Yeah. Well, add to that the idea that we never used agencies.
Mhm.
So we had to ramp our own team up to a certain size to be able to even do those numbers, right? And the average recruiter in especially the tech side, the engineering side, is only going to land about 8 employees in a quarter, right? That's the I think the accepted standard. So I had to have quite a few recruiters in an age when AI was not yet functioning like it is today, to get those folks in the door. But it was an unprecedented time, and it really did lead us to being more innovative in how we thought about things, especially around this mental health piece, because before you guys remember, before we did that, mental health it had a stigma. It wasn't easy to
Mhm.
access mental health. You would wait weeks, months. Nowadays, you have almost instant access. You've got the ability it's treated on par with healthcare now. Um, all those things came to pass during the pandemic. And that's what made it an exciting time, albeit stressful, for the HR team, because we had to think about things that were going to take us to the next level, as opposed to just cranking out the bodies to come and do
Mhm.
the work. We had to make sure they were all healthy, both physically and mentally, right? So that was an awesome time for us to be thoughtful and innovative and different, right?
I want to zoom in there, right? Because there's some uncertainty, and looking back, a lot of the things that has changed in the last 3, 4 years because of the pandemic, we can kind of say like, oh yeah, of course, Zoom was at the heart of it, right? The company, the product, just everything now, or might even seem so obvious. But at the time when you were living it, that organized bedlam, how did you get the buy-in when people were confused, they might have been scared, and you were proposing entirely new things and new means of thinking, right? Like, that's kind of at the heart of being innovative.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I had a particularly good leadership team that trusted me to be able to deliver on the things that we needed to do as a company. So I didn't have a lot of pushback. We were moving so fast and furiously, and we knew what the issues. Remember, it wasn't just the pandemic. George Floyd was happening. Me Too had just happened. I mean, there were so
Mm.
many things that were contributing to this mental burden for employees that I didn't get a lot of pushback at all, really. So I feel like the trust was there for me to be able to bring things forward. And we were living in different times, right? The dollars were flowing too. So now HR has to do things more on a shoestring than they did in the past. So I think the combination of the times we were in, both the economic and cultural, I think really did make it easier. I wouldn't say easy, but easier for me to move things forward that were smart and helpful to our workforce.
Lynn, for human resources, I think most people, whether employees or job seekers, they really don't know how to view them. Like, are they the enemy? Are they like, you know, the mouthpiece of the leadership? Are they here to help people? Like, what's your take? And especially now, like, how's the vibe for HR? Are people generally happy in these positions? Are they like, this is not a great job? Like, what's the sector like?
I think I saw a lot of friends and acquaintances leave the field post pandemic. They really got burned out. I think, like I like to say, I'm the sort of the Switzerland. I'm the middle ground between leadership and the employees. I'm working for the business, but I'm also working for the employees, and I've got to do that delicate dance all the time because, you know, it's important for us to ensure that our employees are I think they're one and the same is what I'd like to say, because I think our employees, if they're thriving, if they're doing well, whether that's mental, physical, financially, we're going to be better off as a company. We're going to be more productive. People will be aligned to our the company, and we'll just all do better, right? So I see my role as one that sort of, I like to say, like, through the people lens, I make the business better. And that's all through facilitation, right? So I think that's how I see the role. And that's maybe why it's been tough with pandemic, and then especially in tech, all the layoffs, for some of the folks in my role to really continue on, and not need a break.
I mean, if you'll allow me to kind of poke at this for a little bit, but you worked at Zoom. You mentioned the change, kind of the vibe within the tech industry. There are these layoffs. What, like, how did you feel when you saw like some CEOs actually conducting layoffs, mass layoffs over Zoom? What was that shift like for you as a seasoned HR executive, someone at Zoom with that product company experience, to kind of see the product being used that way by basically your peers?
Mm. In a remote environment, the only way you can do things sometimes is the way we're doing them today, right?
Right.
I just believe in a higher touch than that. And that doesn't mean in person. It just means that I want to talk to every individual on the day of. I know volume sometimes doesn't allow that, and maybe that's why that had to be done that way. But in the case of Stash, where I am, we actually had some layoffs ourselves, and we personally handled those one by one, no mass conversations.
Mm.
And that's just my philosophy. I don't feel like anybody, especially on the worst day, wants to be talked to with an audience, right? So I it's just the way I think of things. But um, Zoom enabled many things. Unfortunately, that was one of them. But I think in a remote or hybrid world, we have to rely on tools like this. But at the same time, we can't take away the empathy and the personalness of it, even though it's not a personal decision. It, you have to deal with folks with empathy and get on a personal level with them.
I'm really glad you mentioned about empathy, because I'm curious, when you and I maybe first started working, you would have you know conversations, you would speak to people. And now I don't understand how it changed so much, where someone will go on an interview and another interview and another interview and another interview and then just get ghosted.
Yeah.
It just seems so cold. Or you'll be brought in for a PIP, for performance improvement plan, and now you're sweating bullets and you're, oh my God, am I going to lose my job? it just doesn't seem the same that it used to be. I don't mean to be that old cranky man, like, ah, it's not like it used to be. But it kind of feels like back then there was a little bit more empathy and working with candidates and your, employees. Now it just tell me if I'm wrong. Like it just seems colder.
I
My
think it feels colder
yeah.
because we're doing it over this, right?
Mm,
But back in the dinosaur age when I started, I don't know that it was um, any less problematic for the
right.
individual on the other end of that. It's just that you were sitting in front of someone and you felt a little differently. I think it's all about the company and the culture. Like I don't pips. I mean, everybody does them, yes, but I'm a fan of like continuous conversation. Let's give feedback in a contemporaneous way. Let's not wait and do like some drastic pip. And if we do a pip, let's make it achievable. Let's check in with the person on a regular. Let's not just say 30 days or you're out of here and wait till the 29th day, right? So there's a
Exactly.
way
Yes.
to do it.
Yeah.
There's a way to do it. And I think the people who do it well, even if you're in the other end of it, you feel like you were treated fairly. And that's what I think this is all about, is making sure people feel like they're treated fairly. And it's not that hard. It's really not that hard.
So why do you think it happens though? Is it just you get into routine and everyone else is doing it, so you do it and you
I
just get
think
complacent?
I think that during the crazy times when money was flowing like from all our venture friends, we were promoting people at a clip that we couldn't even support. And I'm just using the we as a collective we, especially in the tech space. So if you look across all those first time managers, we then didn't take the time and to help them be the best they could be, right? Because who's the first HR manager? It's the line leader. It's not me. It's the line leader. So if we're not teaching them that part of the job and we're promoting them sort of at that clip without giving them that proper education, they're a little lost, right? And they don't know how often they should be talking to people, how they should be managing performance. We miss some steps in there. We were all growing so fast and so furiously that we were promoting people and not giving them what they needed to do the job the best way they could. That's how I see it. And I think we're all collectively, again, I'm going to use we because I talk to a lot of my peers, we're all trying to remedy that right now by giving the folks who found themselves in that position some more attention, management 101, 102, 103, really trying to bring them along the spectrum. But I think speaking for what I've seen, I think that's where we ran into that issue, Jack.
That makes so much sense because it's putting into perspective. And then nowadays, it seems like these companies are tightening the belts, cutting costs, almost making amends for like we've got drunk with all the venture capital money, as you were saying, and all the dollars flowing and hiring and promoting and letting people have a day in the life videos on TikTok. And now it's like bringing it back. Let's just pull everything back a little bit, not
Yeah,
because we're being mean, but now we got to just we don't have free flowing money. We got to be more cautious.
that's right.
And now that's why you get how it's changing.
Yeah, and we owe it to them, right? So I think, again, since they're the first HR manager, I think it's really critical that we impart on them the skills, because people, what do they leave? They leave managers, not companies. So we want to make sure they're doing the best job that they can do.
I love that approach because I think oftentimes a lot of these stereotypes that we have about HR they come from this kind of defensiveness that like HR professionals might have to put on because, they want to just, oh gosh, like they're in an awful position too, right? Where they have to figure out things on the fly just as employees themselves. I think sometimes we often forget that and have this, us versus them mentality. They're also employees just like us. But also, you know, it stinks to fire people or lay people off, right? Like
My
I've done
God.
it not as an HR person, but as a manager,
Yeah.
and you feel awful even when, someone did something wrong.
Yes. We, at where I am today at Stash, it's very purpose-driven company. And I didn't find purpose-driven work till my 40s, let's say. And then once I did, I was in love. And I'd have to say, like, laying off people is like the worst days I've ever had, even in this really great company where everyone is driven by our mission. Those days suck, and they suck for me as bad as they suck for the manager, as bad as they suck for the person on the other end. I
Is
have,
that an official HR term?
yeah,
Sucks? Yeah, okay.
I have teared up during those. I really have a hard time with my emotions on those days. So I totally agree with you. It is not the best look. And thankfully, I think a lot of that hopefully is behind us. And as a company, as the collective we again, I think companies are finally getting their expenses in line, and they're feeling a little bit better about things. But I do think it's even harder in a purpose-driven company because we're here, Stash is here really to empower people to invest and build better lives, and that speaks volumes to me. But when you have to do the tough stuff, it's still a tough day.
I mean, do you have any advice for kind of your peers at these other companies to kind of rebuild that reputation in terms of kind of bridging that gap versus, getting over that kind of us versus them mentality, or the, these tropes that we often hear, like HR is not your friend, don't trust HR, like what advice do you have for both professionals or the HR side to kind of get over that hurdle?
I think you've just got to be a really good listener. You have to be really curious. You have to look at and hear what your employees are saying, what they want, either through stay interviews, exit interviews, surveys, whatever modality you use to listen to your employees. And then you have to deliver. So if you hear that their major concern is mental well-being, you have to deliver. If you hear it's financial well-being, you have to deliver. If you hear that it's lack of career trajectory, you've got to think about how to do that in a way that gets people re-engaged and motivated. I think it's not hard to just listen and think about what ways, what either tried and true or innovative solutions that are out there to put in place to get people excited about the fact that you're not only listening, but you're hearing them. And so I just think it's like going back to the basics, if that makes sense, and rediscovering your workforce.
Lynn, just to go back to when you said purpose driven,
Yes.
people are not aware. What does that really mean when, let's say for Stash, it's a purpose driven? Is there certain like actual legal parameters around it, or is it just the mindset?
No,
What does that mean?
it's really just a mindset.
Mhm.
So if to a person, this is why I came here, Jack, to a person, everyone I talked to in the interview process talked about the mission. And because we're not just here making widgets, we're doing something to help people in their financial journey. So when everybody to a person is talking about that, it just permeates the place, right? Whether we're in the office together or it remote, we're always talking about how we can help people on their financial journey. So I think that's For me, it particularly spoke to me. I'm a product of a family who never talked about money. We didn't have any money. And I learned that when the financial aid form, like I told you, I was the first one to go to college. So I filled out a FAFSA, mind blowing, filled out a FAFSA, saw my parents what they made, and I was shocked at what they made and how we were making ends meet. I mean, I gave them a lot of credit at that point because I'm not sure how they made ends meet, but they did. And so the idea of working for a company that's actually helping people learn about finances, learn how they can invest and save, to me, that like it really spoke to me. It got my head and my heart, right? So that's what I mean when I say purpose driven. It's all about grabbing the head and the heart. And I think people get really excited about working, especially the younger generations in the workforce. They get very excited about working for companies who have a purpose, besides making a buck, right?
And I know, you can't talk about financial advice because you're not a registered licensed broker or anything.
I am not.
But tell me if this makes sense. And Rick, what do you think too? In this environment with high inflation, high cost, a lot of uncertainty, this and everything I'm reading about is people maxing out their credit cards, they're dipping into their 401k. It seems like now more than ever, and I'm not saying this to kind of, pump up, stash, but it does seem like in this environment, you really do need to really pay attention to your finances, because if you don't, you could really, be in trouble, because it doesn't seem like inflation is going to come down anytime soon. It doesn't seem like costs are going to come down soon. So like if you're not being smart with your money,
Yeah.
right? You could be left behind.
Well, that's the thing. We've had a problem that's been brewing for a long time, but now you've had high inflation, like you said, you had stagnant wages, layoffs. So it's brought that problem to the forefront. And I can't pick up a piece of HR related focused news these days that doesn't talk about lack of financial well-being. And what does that do for us as employers? If you're distracted because you don't have enough money to make ends meet, guess what? You're not doing your job as well as you could be doing it. You're not engaged. In fact, I saw a stat. It's going to be staggering. Ready? $183 billion have been lost to lost productivity due to the impact of financial stress on employees. Can you believe that? That's a huge stat. So back in the day, what did we do? We all replaced our pension plans with our 401k plans, and we thought, done. Wages, Social Security, low inflation, high employment rates. We gave everybody the tools they need. We're done. We're not done, because in my experience, we're missing some key elements. Employees that they desperately need financial guidance, a way to save that's automatic, behavioral incentives. So like just like weight loss, when you lose a pound, you get a prize at Weight Watchers. Same thing. We need incentives to have people save. And man, do they ever need liquidity. I'm going to tell you, when I say it's not a new problem, I used to work for this company, and he was a very generous man that ran this company, and he believed in making sure people had what they needed. So we would do payroll loans, advances. I had a line out the door. People hit a pothole, ruined their tire. They can't afford to buy a tire until the next payday. They can't afford to buy a tire. They can't be at work, right? So there's still a lot to this. And I think employees, they're not suffering in silence anymore. They're telling us what they need, right? And that's why all the news is about this. They're telling us what they need. So we have to be as innovative as we were during the pandemic with mental health. We need to be innovative with financial well-being, because without that, we don't have 100% of our employees. They're just not with us, right? Their heads are in other places. And today, 77% of our employees are saying they want financial wellness, it's important to them, only 28% employees offer them something. So there's definitely a gap that we have to think about, just like we thought about mental well-being during the pandemic. And it's up to us, really, as employers, as HR professionals, to really rethink the paradigm.
Now, if I understand correctly, with Stash, it works B to B, business to business, business to consumer, but the business to business is really growing. And that kind of helping out what used to be back in with my parents, they would have pensions. Now no one really has pensions at all, right? And 401ks,
Only the senators and Congress people.
right? Like, so you have to be on your own. So
That's right.
for Stash, does it hit any category? Is it for very wealthy? Is it for middle class? Is it for everybody? How does it just?
I think everybody could benefit.
Okay.
I mean, I do my little bit of auto stash. And when I open the app and see what I've saved, it's like a nice surprise. So I think anybody could benefit from it, but it's essentially, it's really for that person who wants to save, not just for the long term, but for the short term things, right? And not get caught out when they have to do something that is emergency. We really want to make it easy to consistently and automatically save and give people access to how they invest their monies to achieve those personal goals. So it's a little bit of there's something in it for everyone. And we just launched. So we were staunchly a B2C company, and we saw the need arising for employers to offer something to their employees. And so we've moved into the B2B space, continuing our B2C business as well. But our first cohort of brands just launched, and they're across a spectrum of industries. We got Orify brands launched with us, Peak 6, and Wonder. You've seen them in New York.
Wonder's in my town.
Yeah,
Mark Laurie is I think from Cranford.
Exactly.
Right next door to us.
Exactly. So they're launching with us. They have some of them launched. They're launching over the next couple of weeks, but we're really excited about this because I think it is a very innovative solution for a big problem that we're all facing.
No, I appreciate that look, and I'm struck by your approach throughout your career in terms of empathy and thinking about the other person, because I think that is a good reminder, and I think we'd all be a lot better if we also took that approach. So thank you, Lynne.
In life and in work, yeah.
Certainly.
Well, thank you so much. This was great.